Good evening. I'd like to call a meeting to the RENU Committee meeting, Newell, Minnesota, March 15th, 2016, 6:30 p.m. First item, approve the minutes from the February 16th, 2016 meeting.
I'll move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or anybody like to add comments?
To add my name to the attendees.
Note to add Kathleen Thacker as an attendee to the minutes from the February 16th, 2016 meeting. Any other additions or comments? None being said, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None being said, motion carried. Item number 3, criteria selection rating results. We'll start going through that. And get that far.
All right, maybe to start off with, in your packet, you had the rating results from two groups of people, one from the committee and one from staff department heads, just to kind of see if there was any major differences. We'll just say an error was made in doing the averages. The staff used a frequency method. Who got the most votes, and that's the one they went with. That was not what we had wanted to do. I did email out earlier today the new version, and I don't know if there's the new versions on the computer or not, that actually has the average value. I do have, I think, 5 copies of paper for those that don't have it. So if you want to share, that would be wonderful.
You keep going down?
Yeah, right here.
Oh.
It's on page 8.
Keep going down.
Scroll down.
So we want to be looking at the, oh,
I
okay.
think we're on
Yeah,
page
page 7 and 8.
7 and 8.
They added
All
one.
right. This was-
They added one, I think, this afternoon.
If you don't, I do have a paper copy
It's
here.
on here. Decimal.
I think that's the one that was sent out this
Yeah,
afternoon.
the one with the decimal point, whatever. Now, interestingly enough, when I graphed the staff and the committee, there were a couple where the committee might have went up and the staff was down like 1 point, and then the next one, staff was up 1 point and the committee was down, vice versa. But if you just see this, the graph of it is very consistent, to be quite honest. It's within very little. I mean, that's a pretty decent graph, to be quite honest. So that gives me a little bit of consistency, credibility to the results.
I would think with so many of us doing it that it
Yep.
came out that closely.
Yep, and we had roughly about the same number of people in both groups, and it was kind of interesting to see the results are almost identical.
So, I mean, I don't know that we'd really talked about it. We talked about us doing it, and then with the staff doing it now, do we include the staff as part of the overall, or is
No,
that
I just did that just for my own benefit, because Rochester had a 2-step approach. They actually had the staff rate it, and then they took it to the committee, and then the committee could see how the staff would have looked at priorities and urgency and safety and all those kind of things that we have here for criteria. And I just did it just for more my gratification to see, if we had 2 diverging lines, then I'd say, what's going on here? But given the fact that the lines are really close for the most part, that really gives me, I guess, the sense that it's good results. 2 separate groups came up with the same sort of numbers within reason. There weren't any real rare, odd separations, per se.
It seemed like the staff results were kind of a little bit more squished to the 3.5, where our group was a little bit more, like we had stuff that we averaged in the 2s and stuff, up to 4.3, where the staff was low of 3, high of 4.18. So we took it a little more extreme.
Guess I got a
It's
question for you,
interesting.
Brian. When you looked at the staff, did you just randomly choose different staff people or different departments?
No, I'd send it off to all the city staff that
Okay.
would be, you know, I guess subject to this type of thing. You know, I didn't do the electric distribution supervisor, okay? I did the city engineer, I did the community development director, you know, that group of individuals who would be more prone to knowing maybe the more intimate details of these criteria as it would relate to the projects.
Okay.
So I would just go off of, you know, the committee members' rankings, because like I say, that the staff was just more or less for me to, as just a kind of a checkpoint to see if everything is reasonable,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it is.
Guess I'd like to open it up for discussion if anybody.
I'm wondering if we are going with these decimal values or if we're rounding. Are we going with 3.25 or are we going to round down to 3.0 or?
I think that would be a decision for the committee. I mean, there's no rocket science. You could round them down and round them up to the nearest whole number if you wanted to.
I think it would have more value if we kept the decimal places. I think, given that it's a scale of 1 to 5, not 1 to 100, you know, we're gonna see a whole lot of 3s and 4s, and
Right,
basically everything will become of almost
Yeah.
equal value.
true enough.
Nothing would raise to a 5 and nothing would drop to a 2, so it would
Mhm, mhm.
absolutely only be 3s and 4s.
Well, and as long as I don't have to be the one that multiplies all
Well,
these out.
yeah.
so. Not such a big thing. Machines now,
I'm
right?
sure Brian has a spreadsheet he can,
I think
can
so,
use.
yeah.
if not, I'll help Brian.
We have people, right?
Yes, we have resources available.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, could someone explain then what the next step is as far as this goes? So I see over on the far right, we have proposals. What happens?
Well, committee members, the proposals are not due until the 28th, so nothing happens till the 28th as far as reviewing proposals, because we've got 14
Right,
in so
I
far.
understand that, but in terms of these numbers, you know, what are we gonna do with these numbers?
Well, I mean, one of the questions was, do we round up or round down, or, you know, these are
Well,
decisions.
I think he's getting to the bigger picture. So, like, say proposal 1 comes in.
Yeah.
We have to rank, then from there, high correlation to that criteria. So, pick an example of a proposal that's come in, the theater. Now, we have to go through and say, community safety, does the theater being built have a high correlation to safety?
Okay, so
S- and
0 to 5?
0 to 5, and then from there that gets multiplied. So say it's 0. I mean, there's
Right.
not a lot of community safety there, so that would be 0. So it would be 0 times 3.25, which would be 0. So that, and then at the bottom, it basically calculates a weighted average. So then you sum it up at the bottom, total score amongst all the proposals, and whatever gets the highest score is one of potential candidates. Again, it's not a absolute, but it creates discussion.
Right.
Creates objectivity too in some of the decision. It gives us a reference point
Right.
rather than someone getting excited about one certain thing, but then when you look at the grand scheme of how we see all the different criteria, maybe it really isn't the cream project to be looking at for the community. So I would think the next step, at least for tonight, would be, do we vote on, as it stands, that this is our criteria and this, well, we've already just voted that these are the criteria, but whether we vote on these are the weights that we're going to use for the individual criteria. I think that's the plan for tonight,
And
right?
then maybe to add whether we want the decimal, you know.
Right.
or, you know, if that's how the group is thinking.
Yeah, I had actually, you know, throw out another idea, was to take this range of 2.67 up to 4.33 and artificially put that in a 1 to 5. So 2.67 is a 1 and 4.33 is a 5, and make it so the guy who's doing the multiplication is dealing with 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, artificially, and just position them in there and round them and say, because this is not an exact science, and
No.
just say, here, we're going to rate them 1 to 5 as compared to 2.67 to 4.33, because that's what we really have. That's the range. To spread them out a little bit more, there's no right or wrong. It's just one way of looking at it, and artificially just saying, we'll assign 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to these numbers based on how close they are when you spread them apart.
Trying to think through that math.
I mean, one can do the math with the decimal points, that's fine too,
Yeah.
but you get to the point where you are only 2.67 to 4.33.
Yeah.
I was looking to kind of spread them out to.
You're gonna have more broader scoring at the end
Yeah.
of the day.
Mhm.
Yeah, all your scoring is gonna be tight, just like this, actually.
Right.
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 The difference between a high-scoring project and a low-scoring project, might be 10 points, whereas if you spread them out, spread the multiplier out, it might be 50 points. I just was thinking of things that what I would put before you as something to think about. You can do whatever you want. I mean, it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, I mean, us weighting the proposals though is gonna create a lot more spread too with that 0, 1, 3, 5. So, I don't know. I don't know if that unfairly, I'm trying to think through the logic, if that unfairly penalizes what we as a group ranked at 2.67 to say, okay, that's now a 1 and the 4.33 is now a 5. It's pretty much gonna say anything that doesn't have alternate funding available will not really matter at all, right? I don't know.
Well, all it does is spread it out more. Your low is still going to be the low. If you use, 2.67, your low will always be the low. It's just how much space is in between the projects, so you can get I think a clearer picture
Right.
of who's the top and who's the. Because you could get a clump in the middle. You could have one top, one low one, and a clump in the middle. And with the numbers all condensed like that, are you really going to see that clump clearly? If you spread them out, you would. That was just a thought in looking at this earlier today.
Well, you have 9 criteria. Is there a particular reason you can't take the high and low and the high be number 1 or number 9? Just go 1 to 9. Use these high to low. In other words, the lowest number here would be a number 1, and the highest number here would be number 9, and everything in order on a chart.
You could do that. It's just we
And
set
when
it up
you
1 to 5.
when you evaluate, well, when you evaluate later on, you just, this, I'm
Yeah.
gonna rate this one a 5, I'm gonna rate this one a 4, and whatever, and I'm just asking.
The only thing that it doesn't do is that your 4.33 would be a 9,
there are
and
two
let's
of
say
them.
we had a 4.32. That's an 8,
We have
and
two
then the next one
4.33s.
is 3. The spread between your numbers doesn't. With your numbers
Okay.
it's equal, but with your scores it's not, and so you don't get the weighting like you probably should. So maybe the best thing is to leave it just the way it is, and
Yeah.
because that's the weighting it's got.
I honestly would lean to that personally. I mean, if the group was adamant against that, I would probably lean to this is how we scored it. This is the value we thought they were out of a 1 to 5. So collectively as a group, why not stick with it?
It does go from 292 to 433.
Right.
Taking the decimal point out,
Mhm.
it still
Right.
has
Yes.
quite a significant spread.
Mhm.
And the close one should stay close in a relative way to your point.
Right.
I agree.
One of the things that I was thinking coming in is whether we have a quasi 13th member that we bring into the average value being the city. and the city staff.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's value to making that the 13th member and how we, now, it probably isn't gonna swing much at all, but to at least give the city some input into how this group.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the group is obviously gonna put together a recommendation ultimately, and I think the department heads are gonna, you know, pick out the ones that apply to them, you know, like the street ones, and they're gonna, you know, in all likelihood, probably have recommendations too. So I don't know that we need to have too many bites at the apple either, you
Okay.
know, from a staff perspective, because we'll have our own communications, I think, with the city council.
You'll be able to speak your mind.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's kind of the interesting part about Rochester's plan too, is like the staff was leading this, and I set this up specifically for this committee to lead this. I didn't want the staff, I didn't want it to be prejudiced, that we're gonna push for our projects, you know. This is a committee-driven thing, so I think, you know, not including the staff is just fine. The staff will have opportunity to communicate what their thoughts are on the projects, the pluses and minuses.
Anybody else have any more thoughts in regards to it?
I guess, has the city council, other than the meeting minutes that they're maybe reading, have they commented, or has there been any discussion
There's
on
been
our
no discussion at this
criteria?
point in time. Hasn't been on the agenda.
Okay.
In any
I just didn't know if
aspects.
it was worth us letting them know what our criteria is, and
I think they're copied on, all the
Okay.
minutes.
so we'll just
and,
leave it at
you
that.
know,
Yeah, at this point in time, I think if you have the council involved, I mean, we have a representative from the council on
Right,
here.
right. I just,
The whole point was not to have the council involved and drive.
I just don't want them
drive
to
the
all of a sudden
train.
go, why isn't,
Yeah.
some other criteria that we didn't think of on here or something, but
Yeah.
I doubt that will
like I
happen,
said,
so.
I take it, that I'm here as the council member,
Got it.
to be a
Yep.
representative, and, they're given kind of the free will to this committee.
Yep.
And looking to this committee for advisory, as the community
Got it.
at whole, and.
'Kay.
And these are, this is why we have a diverse group, and.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we bring it back.
And I think, I'm remembering Chairman Pryor's, comments, I think, in the last couple of meetings, although I wasn't at the last one until the very end. But these numbers that we end up calculating, we're still supposed to be, I think, a guide to be able to sit there and say, okay, we went through a process. But even though this one scored low, this is an important, we may say this is an important project that we want to carry forward. So this is a method to help sort, but it's not that if this is the lowest one, we're not going to do it. The committee may turn around and look at it ranked low, but it actually is a really good project. And you would carry it forward if that was your recommendation. That's what I've been, hearing out of Toby, commenting, and the group. I mean, it was kind of like, this is a guide to help sort out, but it's not the end all. So.
Okay, well,
So Bob, did I answer your question?
I'm still kind of, the correlation part over on the right-hand side, 0 to 5, that, to me, that seems more objective than subjective. For instance, you made that example about the theater and community safety, and that would probably be a 0. It stands to reason that there's a lot of these that would just be, not very subjective when you do the correlation part.
I took that to be the intent, to make it more of to give us something of a more objective process to use as information as a group when we make the decision, rather than, everyone getting excited about the State Street Theater, but then when we realize of what we've agreed upon as our criteria of what are good projects, if it comes out very, very low, then, objectively looking at it, we maybe decide that we shouldn't do it. because it doesn't meet the criteria of whatever, community safety. If community safety and urgency were the top two, but they're not, but. So I think that was the point, to give when Janelle worked through this, was to give us a objective way to look at projects without, and being able to compare them against each other when they're gonna be very diverse, when you're trying to compare a State Street Theater against a water park, against a arena addition, against construction on our streets, right? So, I think that's the point.
And this is just the one step, like Brian said, we'll use these criteria to go through the ranking process, and then we're going to have the presentation of the groups, we're going to have our own discussions. So I think we'll thoroughly rehash and look at all of the projects in different ways, and then, make some final recommendations or decisions. It's just not gonna be on the numbers and the ranking. But it's gonna be a piece of it, which I think is very important, to get that conversation or that discussion going.
Agreed.
Well, I'd make a motion to approve and use the weighted rankings, or the average that we came up with, and also use what we've had predetermined, the 1 to 5, is it, or was it 0 to 5?
It was 0, 1, 3, and 5, I think is.
Okay. For ranking the projects as they come in.
Janelle, is that how you saw
It
it?
might have been an error. I maybe forgot the 4 when I.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna say,
Maybe a
There's no
typo.
2 and there's no 4.
Yeah, typo.
So 0 to 5.
Yeah, 0 to
Yeah,
5.
that's what I was gonna say.
0 to 5.
-4.
I think
No.
Brian's team took it out of there.
Right.
That's what I think
Yeah.
happened.
My fault.
Make sure everybody's awake. Are you still thinking the decimals too? Or to round up?
Would say
I
it's-
I would do it as it's presented here. Yeah, that's my motion.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None being said, motion carried. Yes, our next item of business here is other business. Do you have any other business?
Well, I did include, that it wasn't ready by the time the agenda went out, but Reg Vorwick, Finance Director, presented the sales and use tax receipt, so we've got the latest one.
Page 10.
You notice it actually,
Down
what's it
here,
come up to?
Kathleen, thank you.
We got, December's number on the sheet with all the colors and all that. And at least, for 2015, you can see a full year's worth of numbers. And as we talked, I think at one of the last meetings, we probably won't get 2015's more specific numbers until 2017 from the state. So we can only draw any conclusions of what's going on with our economy and who's doing well and who's not doing well based on our own personal viewing of what's going on in our community. But if we're down a little bit, we went from 1.3 million down to just under 1.2 million, so it's taken a dip, and we'll see what happens in 2016 to see if that's a trend, if it continues to go down, or if that was just a low year. So it's unfortunate we don't have really instantaneous numbers, because January's gone and February's gone, and we're almost halfway through March, and all we're really looking at is the December total has now been verified. And you can understand, I think, from the state's perspective that they've got kind of money coming and going, and until all the accounting has been processed and refunds and all the different things that happen after the fact, that they don't want to give a number and then 2 months later, they find out that, well, it's higher or it's lower than it should have been because of those adjustments. So the state holds off for 3 months and we get what we get. But this is the most current one we have.
Mr. Chairman. So if I look at the 2013 November, December numbers, I mean, those are way above any other numbers ever reported. Can you draw any conclusions about why they're so high?
Excuse me.
I mean, is there any studying going on as far as the anomalies?
To be truthful, my perception is you have to go all the way back to 2008 and the restrictions on maybe personal income spending habits was good for about 3 or 4 years. I mean, the economy dropped, people didn't spend as much, they were concerned about spending, and then you reached a point where you were feeling better about the economy, because about this same time, all of the apartments started getting constructed, and all it kind of bust loose. There was a pent up demand for apartments, and nobody was building anything, and all of a sudden, 2013, we got new apartments going up all over the place. I think we had 5 proposed in 2013, and 3 were constructed, and 2 are still being considered for construction. So in that time period, I saw the housing, kind of slow down a little bit, and then all of a sudden it busts loose. And I think that's a reflection of everybody's pocketbook too. They didn't spend for so many years that at one point in time they go like, now we have to, maybe now we got to buy that computer we've been holding off on, and now we're going to get that flat screen TV. I don't know, but I'm just saying, you saw that in the numbers here, that there was a real uptick, and that not only carried through with November, December, but it went January, February, and March the next year too. I mean, that was a hot winter, to be quite honest, and I don't know why.
Well, didn't Walmart and Menards and all of that construction and all of that, all those people working and living here, it wasn't in that same time frame?
I think Menards was for sure. I think Walmart was.
Yeah, Menards was
prior to
there.
that.
Well, they had all the contractors and all these people living and eating and whatever here. I thought that was in another discussion we had. I thought that was one of the reasons.
Well, could have been, but look in 2014, the green continued all the way through the end of October that year. So to me, that was a push. It was like there's pent up demand. We held our spending for so long, and at some point in time, you go like, I got to start replacing this stuff. I got to start fixing my house, or I got to start doing this stuff, and it busts loose in a tremendous year. And I think that's part of the issue, is that people spent so much in that one year that maybe they held back. They held back in the next year. We got our needs have been met, and now we're satisfied, and we don't have to continue that spending. That's my theory. I've got a minor in economics, and that's all it tells me. and with that and enough money for a cup of coffee, we can both go to Larkspur or something. But that's my theory. You can probably have 10 other theories, but that's mine. And I don't know if the housing, if you can relate that to the housing market. If you saw a big boom in end of 2013 running into 2014. I don't know those records, but some people may have that knowledge. They say, yeah, we saw that in housing. Big spike. A lot of houses sold. I don't know that. I've not looked at the whole spectrum of sales. I'm just knowing that in my personal family, in my own personal life, 2008 through 2012, didn't buy a lot of stuff. And I think I'm kind of representative of the economy. So the information, you know, could mean different things to different people, but that's my perspective of the world.
Well, it certainly gives us an idea of, we can expect likely not more than an average of 1.3 million a year for the next umpteen years, but probably certainly something more than a million.
Mhm.
Beyond that, it's consumer trends, market trends, right?
Well, I think if you go back, you know, I mean, let's go back to, 2003 when we were at $768,000.
Yep.
You know, generally speaking, I don't know that we've plateaued, the next 20 years, we could just continue to go up 150, 200,000 sales. Some of it might be inflation related. Some of it might be growth. Some of it might be new stores coming in, that might be offering something that's not currently here. My gut feeling is this is going to continue to grow. It's not going to go back down to 768,000 5 years from now. I don't think that's going to happen. If it does anything, it's going to either, flatline and grow a little bit, or it's going to continue at the same sort of growth that we've had in past years. Again, my theory and my theory only. So I think, the future, I think, is still good for our projections. If we were still looking at, like, what was it, 13 to 19 million dollars, let's take an average of 15, for projects. I think that number is still a valid number.
So because that happened, there's a nice reserve there that they could pay these off right now if they wanted to?
Yeah. But the other side of that coin was, that was the fund that we've collected was to pay for the roof and pay for the
Air conditioning.
compressors and all that stuff that have limited lives and all that stuff, so that doesn't go back on the tax roll. People don't like to pay taxes either, property taxes. So that's one of the issues the council's gonna have to decide, is when they finally get to that point, do we do it sooner or do we do it later, and how does that impact that fund, and ultimately, how does it impact property taxes in the end?
Brian, do you know what kind of interest rates the municipal bonds are being issued at these days?
Oh, gee whiz, I think last year, I wanna say probably under 2%. Because if you do the special assessments, we usually do 2% over the bond rate. And I believe I heard Mr. Kaler say the interest rate was like 3.85 or something like that
3.85.
for last year.
Okay.
But we won't know until we sell the bonds for this year. Things change in 1 year's period, but
Right.
I don't know that interest rates are screaming up as far as like geo bonds and that. They've been pretty stable.
I mean, those low interest rates will help us too. I'm sure they weren't at that rate when we issued the bonds back in.
Right. I think back
First
then,
round.
I think rates were, gosh, maybe Bob can remember, but I want to say our bond rates were probably in the 5-6% area.
So less of your money will be going to pay interest, and more of it can go towards project expansion.
So if you look at selling bonds, now's a really good time to sell bonds because the interest rate is really low.
Right.
And I'd even have to ask Reg to, maybe he could pencil that out, but we probably even had different levels of interest rates through the 20 years.
Oh, okay.
Years 1 through 7, might have been 5%, and years 8 through would have been 5.5, and because the longer you have to pay it back, they typically want more interest. So the shorter ones are lower, and the longer ones are higher in interest. So it would have been a spectrum of interest rates, probably 3 or 4 different kinds of interest rates through the 20 years. And then we also, nope, that was a different bond issue. Forget that. I was going to say, I thought we front-end loaded or rear-end loaded the bond issue. So, I mean, that pushes the interest rate around a little bit too. So it all depends on how you structure your bond issue as to what interest rates you're going to get. it helps determine those.
Any other discussion?
Just for
As far as
myself,
the-
how many preliminary proposals are in?
I believe
We just have the 14 so
14
far,
in.
the original 14. I've not received anything in addition to that.
Okay.
But, you know, the 28th will tell if anybody else comes in. I mean, I talked to somebody who was thinking about, you know, submitting one, so it's very possible, you know, something might come in. The other one that I should probably bring that out under other business. I did get or asked a question to City Attorney Hippert, and we were talking about city-owned projects versus non-city-owned projects. His comment is our city attorney's office is to use the bright line test. You can all Google that and find out what that is. But the bright line test is basically, if it smells like a rose, looks like a rose, it's probably a rose, you know? If it's not a city-owned project, it probably doesn't qualify. And so, you know, we might have one project that would be considered like non-city owned. So as we get closer to the actual analysis, you know, and actually scoring, we'll identify those or any others that may not be, you know, qualifying. But that's the city attorney's opinion, is that if the city's not gonna own it, then we're not likely be able to spend the sales tax money on it. Now, let's take the theater program project. You know, they're kind of talking about they want the city to own the facility and then lease it back and work this thing through, so that its underpinnings are basically city-owned. The city council hasn't accepted it,
Right.
but the underpinnings of the project was, if we could do this, that would make that project so much better, you know, more financially feasible. The other one would probably be the Turner Hall gymnastics program. And again, it all depends on how you want to structure that program. If they're going to say, we want the city to own the building, you know, and we'll lease it from you, I mean, then you got the city-owned project, and we can move on. So I'm not ruling out any of these projects. I think we need to know more about, you know, the two questionable ones, whether or not, how they're gonna structure it, whether or not it fits the city attorney's, you know, opinion of city-owned or not. So that's why I really haven't said much up till now, because we need to see the full project when it gets sent to us on the 28th. That's when we'll be able to make decisions whether or not it'll work out or not. And quite honestly, I didn't want to tell people, don't apply, don't submit something, because you might be telling somebody not to submit something when it really would work, because I don't know all the details. So it's best just to tell everybody to submit your stuff, and we'll sort it out when we get to that point.
So can I make an assumption then that in April, seeing as this is the end of March when the proposal will be in, that we're gonna probably have some abundance of meetings with presentations of these projects for us? And my understanding
I would
was
think so.
the people that want these projects are gonna make a presentation to us. Is that correct?
I mean, that's up to your committee, but that's what I've heard in past
So,
discussions that we were gonna have.
Anticipation, April will be a busy month for us to try to meet the deadlines for the council.
Right, and just as a reminder, the committee voted last time to meet on the 29th. So the stuff has gotta come in on the 28th. I'm gonna scan whatever I get and probably make some paper copies too. It'll all be here, and, cause we're meeting the 29th at 6:30 to see what we got. And then I think a week later, you've got the city council meeting, you know, again, and then after that, we would normally meet again.
Okay.
And then I think you'll be able to decide what your schedule's gonna be in order to hear proposals or get more information or get explanations of what's going on.
I think what we had discussed is that we would move to 3 a month.
I can't hear you.
What we had discussed is that we'd move to 3 meetings per month once we got into April and we had the full proposals. I think that was Bob's recommendation, probably about
As
2
an
months.
option.
About 2 months
As an
back, yeah.
option,
Yeah.
if we need it.
So it could be, you know, on the 29th, we could ask staff to, you know, line up one of our first presentations, you know, come April 5th. I believe that's our next
Yeah.
council meeting, or renew meeting date. So.
Yeah.
And they could be coming up fast.
Yeah, it'd be just nice to get our hands on the full proposals and just start the discussion.
When we're talking about the full proposals, is my understanding that we can get those hard copy printed? I'm old-fashioned, I can't read them off of the computer and do my markings and so on, so are we able to come in and get copies of all of those proposals?
Committee member Backer, they sell printers out at office supply stores.
I have a printer, but it doesn't print like the city printer.
Yeah, if somebody wants a paper copy, I'm sure we can get a paper copy in your hands.
Thank you.
You just don't want to use your ink, that's all.
There you go.
She said she couldn't read it off her.
Yeah, if anybody has any requests, by all means, you know, we can send out paper, or we'll make paper copies, just, you know, like I did tonight, maybe a couple, 5 copies or something for somebody that would prefer to have that. But I would suspect it's gonna be a pretty hefty piece of paper when you add them all together and.
Yeah. Is any other further business for new business?
Move to adjourn?
And we'd move to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None being said,
Thanks.
meeting adjourned.